And I wanted to welcome you to today's webinar on Do You Want to Build an eDay, which we will be covering questions and some points about our virtual option for inclement weather. I want to remind everybody there's probably going to be a lot of you that have questions, and if you do, that's great. We'd appreciate if you would put those in the chat box as we go along, and Mary and I will be monitoring those, and I'll try to get to all of your questions. But if other people have things to share and answers, please feel free to jump in the conversation there in the chat box. And when you do use the chat box, be sure you're saying to everyone so that we can all share in the messages. So I really am appreciative of all of you that came on here today. For the last couple of months, I've spent a lot of time talking to individuals and small groups of people from districts around our state and actually well beyond our state about the virtual option for inclement weather. And I thought maybe it was just a good time to come together and let me kind of take people through the process of what's happening in Indiana around this so we could get a little more clarification around it. Just about an hour ago, I was on a call with 9 different states from around the U.S., from up in Massachusetts all the way out in Wyoming, Kentucky. Some of us had gathered together to talk about this kind of opportunity that a lot of the states are just now coming to. I know in Massachusetts they're just wading in, and it's a good time for them because they have 2 feet of snow, the girl that I was talking with on the call. So this is definitely not something that's just happening in Indiana. It is something happening all over the country. And I think the reason we're just seeing this now, these options for allowing weather not to interfere with learning, is because we really are seeing that kind of learning happening in our schools, blended online learning happening all the time. So we're really just getting to a place, whether you're in Massachusetts or out in Wyoming or Indiana, where you can really start to feel comfortable with that. So that's kind of where we are, and you'll see my team did had a little fun with this on the slide that you see right now, but I spend a lot of time talking about the virtual option, so a lot of times I do feel like kind of the queen of snow and ice. So Mary, if we'll just go to the next slide, I think what we're going to do is just jump right in and take a look at the application. I think that's going to be the easiest thing to do is just step through it, because what it'll allow me to do is to kind of elaborate on what some of those assurances are. So at the Department of Education, what we do respect is what's happening in your schools and what's best for your students should be your decision. Certainly from the Office of eLearning, that is what we believe. And so in that regard, we didn't want to have so many walls around this initiative that it just didn't make sense for your students, but we did want to guarantee certain things for learning happen. So that's why we have just a list of assurances, and we're going to walk through those. So this very first slide just obviously is just some real general information that starts out, but it's very important that you get these pieces filled, because when I do reach back out to people, it's important to have this information. So it just starts out with the contact information, and then if we'll go on to the next slide, Mary. I know she's muting people and doing things. Thanks, Mary. So the next part helps us in the department to determine, when you're applying, what is this going to look like? So obviously you can see there that there's different grade levels that you might include. So this doesn't have to be a K-12 option. So first of all, let me just say, and this is the next 2, which probably kind of feeds in with the levels. So the questions that are asked next are, will you be using it on an inclement weather day? And then the next one are, will you be using it also or instead of just on a planned makeup day? So you can probably see that if you're using it on a planned makeup day, if you're going to use a virtual option, you would not necessarily have to do it for K-12. You might just be doing it for high school students, for example, to keep them from keeping graduation at a certain date at the end of the year. So that might be your plan. If you're doing it on an inclement weather day, that most likely would take all of the grade levels in your district or school into account. That option, doing it on an inclement weather day, is a much heavier lift for our districts. And as we go through the assurances, I think you can understand why. being able to offer learning for all students and for teachers to have time with the students and instruction on a makeup day is much easier because it allows for schools to actually still be open, labs be staffed, students the opportunity to come into a building, if possibly their own learning styles or their connectivity or so forth could not be used at home, that makeup day option to still being able to use the school is there. So using on a makeup day is not quite the lift that it is on an inclement weather day. So when you do the application, you can certainly check either or both of these options. Some people want to keep their options so open to say, you know, we might first just use it on a makeup day, but depending on how that goes, we might get better at and do it on an inclement weather day. But I encourage you as we go through this to really be thinking about this, because doing it on a weather day is, again, a much heavier lift. And you can see there is a statement that says, if you're participating in this program, whether on a makeup day or on an e-learning day, or on an actual inclement weather day, at the end of all of this, in June, I will put out to everyone who's participated just a form for you to fill out. It won't really ask a lot of information, but it will ask, you know, what dates did you actually use the virtual option on, and what was your attendance on those dates. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like as we go along. And Mary, I think you can take us to the next slide. So remember, if questions are coming up for you as I go along, please just put them over there in the chat box, type them in, and we'll certainly try to get those answered as we go along. So the next part is the actual start of the criteria. And notice right at the top, it says to use this virtual option, the superintendent of the district must respond in affirmative on all of these criteria that we're going to go through now. So by doing that and by signing at the end of this, that says we can, as a district, as a school, make good on these statements. So let's take a look at what we're asking people to do. So the first one, our district can demonstrate access to the internet for students and teachers away from our building. That, again, every one of these can look different depending on your district. So you need to know that for some districts that have been doing this now, you know, we have people doing this last year and this year, and I've talked with so many of those people and visited some. There are some districts where we have a few, maybe you have a few students that don't have connectivity. I know schools that have given out wireless access cards, so those few people can use that on an inclement weather day. Other places, because they're only using it on makeup, they know that they have worked with their community and their public libraries and some of their even church organizations or restaurants in the area have Wi-Fi and are going to be available. But again, that would be on a place where kids could get even if the weather was bad. So just that may look very different. It doesn't say that every student has to have been given a device from the school K-12. We're not saying that, but throughout all of this, I think the key is your communication has to be happening. So you know your students and your families, and maybe you have 96% of your district with devices at home, whether you provided them or they have them at home, and they have connectivity. So you know that, or you should know that before you ever enter into this, and if that's the case, that's fine. If you have a few students, maybe they, you know, we have schools with Amish populations where they're not going to have that kind of connectivity at home. We do understand, and this is going to apply to many of these statements, where there are going to be specific populations of students or individuals that will have to have their option for learning met in a different way or a slightly different way. But if you're saying, well, you know, all of our kindergartners or all of our primary kids do not, and they cannot do this virtual option, so we're just going to send home with them a bag with, you know, books and worksheets, that is not the virtual option. if you have to make accommodations for small numbers of students or individuals with different learning styles or so forth, that is understandable and will have to be worked through. But if you're adopting the virtual option, it is because you truly can demonstrate access. And I think the next one is the most important part of that. All of our teachers and students have access to and experience using an online platform delivering learning. So there's kind of a tricky part for me. So maybe you say to me, and I've had these conversations, well, our kindergartners and first graders, we don't give them a device, but we have, talked to families and we know they have devices at home. Well, that's great. But do students, if they are at home, and do those kindergarten and first grade teachers know how to make learning happening away from the building if they're not using it at all during a regular school day? So ideally for me, in the perfect world of this option, what we would see on an e-learning day when students are home and teachers are home and learning is happening is you would just see a continuation of the kind of things that are going on in a classroom possibly the day before. So say on a Monday, students have their devices, they are interacting with the teacher even though she's in the room or he's in the room. They've put lessons online, they have resources online, kids are going to certain apps, there is communication through blogging or online chat. Those kind of things are happening even as part of a traditional day, so that when a day to stay home happens, it's not such a big lift or a completely new way of teaching and learning for students and teachers. Now, I know that very few of our districts or classrooms are at that point where it's just a seamless transition from that to a day at home. But we have to be aiming toward that, and we have to be doing professional development and work with our students and teachers that are getting us to that place. So for that statement, they have to know how this is going to work. So I guess I have a lot of people ask me, couldn't we do a practice day? Can you give us a day, an e-learning day to practice this? Well, no. This waiver is for an actual inclement weather day or a makeup day, so it's not to just be given to practice. But what some districts have done and done this successfully is they've been planning this since even last year when this was first an option. They knew they were going to get to this point. So they started purposely having teachers come together and looking at their lessons and planning with a more digital way of delivering content and resources in mind. And then on a day that they designate as kind of a practice time, what they've done is that district has made sure all devices went home that day. So maybe first graders, for example, have iPads in their classrooms, but they don't normally take them home. But with lots of preparation and communication, they have sent them home on a day, and in that evening, between certain hours, they've had what I would call like a practice. So they make sure that every student can log in, do some low stakes kind of activities to interact, to access resources, to get on an app, so that you can actually, as a district, test out, did it work? Could teachers get on? Could students get on? How did our technology work? So that kind of a practice and kind of an after-hours thing has happened in some of our districts and has worked well. So I think that is one of the options for making sure that this is happening. So so someone makes a point, yes, can you download materials onto devices before they go home for students that could not? And that's absolutely the case. Many learning management systems allow for content, even video, to be cached, downloaded onto the actual device. Or I know I've seen a kindergarten where they made sure all the apps were on the device. Kids knew how to use them. They were ready to do that. And that went home then, possibly then with a paper sheet for parents that kind of describes some of the learning, or on a website that parent teachers are putting up. So some people are using combinations of those. But if you know at school, and I've seen this now in the chat, so snow bags or blizzard bags, as a lot of people call them. New Hampshire has a thing they call blizzard bags. That is not a virtual option. So if you are using blizzard bags for entire grade levels, and the only thing in those bags are books and worksheets, and there is absolutely no virtual option, no online learning to that. That is not this option. That is not what you need to do. If you have small groups of students that might need that accommodation, that is understandable. I've also had a district where one district told me that was happening in a neighboring district, but when we actually went to check, what was happening is in the very first time they did it, they actually did send home some things, but it was kind of as a backup. They still had everything online, but they were using that as a backup because they were just really nervous about that first experience. So we are all learning. This is all new, and it's certainly not only new for Indiana, but as I heard today, it's new all across the U.S. So we're all getting better at it. But again, it is not acceptable to be saying that to check these off as a yes and then have entire grade levels not really accessing things online. But could a kindergartner have, a book that has been brought home to read out of? Yes. Could students be in the kitchen? I've seen one teacher send home little baggies that had, marshmallows and raisins, and kids were counting them out, and that's perfectly acceptable. Then they were then sharing some of that learning with pictures and things online. So there's absolutely a blended model to this, but it can't be just blizzard bags, if you will, or snow bags full of worksheets. So the next assurance says all of our students will be informed of their learning targets for the day by 9 a.m. on that day. So, of course, I think that's very understandable, fair. I don't think that one needs very much explanation. But regardless of how you're doing that, if a teacher is posting them on a webinar or on a web page, if they have a Google Doc with everything in there, by 9 a.m. on that day, students should be able to know what they're doing and get access to it. This next one is a heavy lift, and this is a heavy lift on those days if you're doing it from home. Teachers will be directly reachable from students and parents to facilitate and support instruction. This is not a day of homework without teachers. This is a day of instruction. The places I've seen this working, it's been amazing to me to watch this happening. So many of our districts that are using it on the day also are using social media as a way to help with it. So they may have a hashtag, and I've been able to follow along on those days with lots of pictures and sharing this happen. And then through interviewing some of the teachers and students around the state. So teachers are making this accessibility in different ways. And again, depending on the kind of capacity your district has, it can look different. So I've seen it everything from phone calls. Teachers are available all through the day, certain hours of the day, maybe kind of office hours, if you will, for specific grades, for specific content areas, for specific groups. Even if you're an elementary teacher, you might have your students grouped in different ways. So they might just be available by phone. And some districts have relay systems that allow a teacher not to give out their home phone, but students will call into a number at the school, and then that's relayed to teachers. So that could be it. A lot of times they're using email. Some of the best ones I've seen have a live chat going, just like we have right now going on here. I've seen teachers open up their live chat if they're inside of a learning management system that provides that, or they have a Google Doc that's open. They post questions in there. Students go in and answer them. They talk to each other. I've watched students support each other in a live chat with the teachers to help. I've also seen teachers schedule office hours video-wise. I watched a Google Hangout of a teacher. She divided her class into 4 groups of, about 6 kids per group, and she had scheduled Google Hangouts at different times during the day where they could all see each other in that group and the teacher, and she was talking them through. So you have to have access for teachers on the days that you're using for the virtual option. So again, that can look very different. It can be a combination of all those things. It can be one or the other, but it has to be accessible. Now, I did have a school say they had a teacher that was really deathly ill on that day, and so they had made provisions, though, kind of like we do, and I'm a classroom teacher first. I know what that looks like. You work with your team of teachers that can step in there and help support your students. I've seen counselors step in and support on those days, being the contact. So just like we do on any day in our schools, we do what's best for students, and we try to get there. It just definitely looks a little different here. So I haven't seen a lot of questions, so if you have them, be sure you're putting them in there. And Mary, do you want to take me to the next slide, please? So continuing the criteria, student work will cover content that have been addressed if school were in session. Now there's a good one. So again, like when I was describing earlier what I would consider the kind of perfect scenario, you know, we're in class, in the building on a Monday, Tuesday we're home because of snow, the learning continues. I realize, again, we're not all at that place where we can deliver that kind of teaching and learning seamlessly. But we also don't want people to just have this bank of lessons that are totally unrelated to what is happening in the classrooms that they pull in on an e-learning day. Now, having been an elementary teacher, I know there were certain standards that I could go over probably every day of the year and still have students need some more support in that area. So I'm not saying you can't pick out some of those things that really you're working on within the scope of your sequence of your curriculum and address them. But we don't want to just have, you know, oh, it's e-learning day, so today we're going to just learn about fire safety. You know, it can't just be, and nothing against fire safety, but you can't just pull in these pre-packaged up lessons. Now, I know lots of districts that have put together very meaningful lessons, and they have kind of a set of those, so they're working on them. Like they know that for the next couple of weeks, they're going to be covering these standards, and then they've got together their fourth grade teachers and their high school English teachers, and they've built some lessons that can be used with good digital resources. But again, you want to keep that as much as you can in line with the scope and sequence of your curriculum. And that's part of the reason for even doing these days, is we all know that when we add days to the very end of the school year, after we've already collected, testing is over, grades have been collected, resources have been collected, you know, what we end up doing on those days sometimes is not as valuable as the kind of days we would have back in January and February. So as much as we can keep that student work in sequence, the better it would be. And again, that can look very different in terms of how you get those lessons created. I very much like the districts who have brought teachers together to do that. They've worked and helped everyone, kind of bring everyone up to speed on what that looks like, and then gradually release that lesson creation back to each individual teacher. But for those first times, a lot of times they've gathered people around and worked on that together. So the next one, all students who have accommodations for instruction will be provided with those or have access to those accommodations. Again, I think I addressed that a little bit earlier, and this kind of covers for the next two. So for limited English proficient students, for students with disabilities, again, this is going to be what meets those students' needs and how you address that in your district. I know people who have said to me, I've had superintendents say, well, you know, we're making sure that those minutes for accommodations are still being met. We're just, you know, scheduling differently after we get back from being off, just like you would on a day if kids were home and they didn't have those minutes, then you're going to address them a different day. Again, students with disabilities who an online platform for learning is not appropriate, then I've had teachers talk to me. I talked to one just last week. He said, well, you know, I'm working with the parents. I send home lots of activities. I talk to my parents weekly, sometimes daily, every week. So this is not really that big of a stretch for them. So again, it is an individual student what makes their needs, but we must guarantee that learning can happen for all students, whatever that looks like. So any of these students with disabilities or English, not English, limited English, we just have to make those accommodations. Many times, technology is absolutely a great tool for meeting the needs of those students and meeting the needs of all students on a much more individualized platform where we can really meet kids where they are. But again, we have to make sure that we're prepared to do that and students are prepared to interact with their learning that way. So Mary, you want to take me again? So what I was saying about minutes, someone asked about that, minutes is, If you have students that you know, have certain accommodations, they work with a specialist so many minutes per week, then I know districts that are just rescheduling those minutes to make sure they're covered. If for a different answer, if you have a student who, let's say an online version is really just not something that's going to meet their needs. During a regular class day, the student does not work with any kind of technologies. This is just not something that's appropriate for them. Well, then just like we would on any day, we're going to meet that child's learning needs differently. And so, as I said earlier in this webinar, some people have built that into IEPs ahead of time. They have certainly opened up these conversations with their families prior to ever trying this. That usually takes individual calls, conversations by teachers and families for those students with special needs to say, you know, what is this going to look like? You know, how are we going to accomplish this? For anyone trying an online e-learning day, whether it's makeup or it's on the day, I cannot stress enough about how you have to get ahead of this. You've got to get in front of it. Communication is key, letting everyone know what's going to happen, how it's going to look, who are they going to call for help that day. So many of our districts on the tech side have been so amazing. They've had tech people even brave the elements and come in on snow days to be there on a helpline, help desk for technology questions. Certainly teachers have been online, on the phones, on chats, helping their students go through things. So, but communication, letting people know so that the day that it happens isn't the first time that a parent or a student or a teacher really is trying this out. It has to be a lot of communication. Now, do we know that there's going to be pushback from families, from teachers, from students? Certainly. And I hear a lot of those, actually. Not a lot, to be honest. There has not been a lot. But I get some of those. But, you know, we all, if we've been in education for any amount of time, it's very hard to make everyone happy and to meet everyone's needs. So I am not, you know, fazed really by a call from a parent or an email saying, you know, oh my goodness, what about this? I certainly always redirect those people back to their own districts and hope that they have talked with their classroom teachers and their building administrators and their district administrators. But I certainly know that we can't make everyone happy. But I think we go a long way by starting out the beginning with lots of communication. This is what it's going to look like. Here's a sample lesson. Let's have everyone log on this evening. If you can't, please reach out to us. So I cannot stress that enough, that's all that can happen. I just saw someone called out Southern Hancock. Does a great job with Technology Call-In Center. That is fabulous. And I know they have, I've actually seen pictures on their days of they have some administrators and tech people sitting around a conference table, you know, answering those calls, answering those chats from students. I know certainly Yorktown has done the same thing. I've been witness to that. Maconaquah, the very first time they tried it on a snow day, those people came through the snow. They're tech people and were in the building. So it is a lift for people, but I love when people are pulling together. And that's one thing I want to make sure I share. This has just been phenomenal to see and look at the pictures that people have shared of kids doing amazing things at home. And learning, and parents just saying, wow, what a window into my child's day. Also for the students who say, great, can I do my math first because I really want to get it out of the way. It's something I struggle with. You know, absolutely. It's a freedom for students to suddenly be able to design their own learning day. And certainly that's a skill that students need. Many times, you know, when students go away to college for the first time, and they certainly have to manage their time for the first time possibly, truthfully. And this is a great way for kids to say, you know, yeah, you can go out in the snow, but these are the obligations that you have to get finished. And that's a really good transition into this next statement on the screen, which is students will demonstrate time on task and equivalent learning growth for the time. So that is kind of how we put words around attendance. So how are we going to know if students were actually interacting with the learning? And again, this goes back to individual districts figuring out how are they going to check in? How are we going to know that kids are interacting? Now, many times when we use learning management systems, On the back side of that, on the technology side of that, we can actually see how many minutes and time students were logged in, how many minutes they were in each section of learning, you know, objectives. So that sometimes by minute-wise is a much easier thing to do than we can just look out over our classrooms and know if kids are actually even listening or engaged in the learning. Other times I've seen districts that say, you know, each teacher has, you know, a Google Doc again, let's just say, and kids have to come in the morning and kind of log in, answer a question that they've posed, put their answer, and they do it again later in the day. So there's lots of ways to get to that. But I think what we all want is to know that whatever learning we've set forth for students, that's happened. So some people say, you know, assignments are due the next day. People give students a little bit extra time in case they did have to, you know, maybe go to a neighbor's or grandma's to get on the internet. So that, again, is up to a school district. We do need to show that equivalent time trade-off, but I certainly know that students could certainly work through assignments a lot faster than they would in a classroom if you take away all of the other things that go on during our school days that take away from actual students interacting with the learning. And we know that that happens. One of the greatest lessons I think that people have to learn as they do this, what I've heard and kind of witnessed, is how much is too much on a day of e-learning, how much is too many assignments, how much is not enough. So some of the people that have done this write-off have said quickly, you know, gosh, we gave them too much, we didn't give them enough. So as in, you know, I remember being a first-year teacher, and I'm sure many of you do too. That was one of the toughest things for me, is to know how much work we were going to get through in a day. So this is that same kind of dilemma, just looks a little bit different. And, you know, having those ways of checking in with your students throughout the day really helps that. And then also, many of our districts are doing a lot of surveying of people after an e-learning day. What worked? What didn't work? They're getting feedback from students, from parents, from teachers, and then they're using that to redefine what it looks like as they go forward. So I think that, again, back to that communication is really, really key for anyone. I was just looking in here. So if you are doing virtual learning for a specific grade population, let's say you're only doing it for 6 through 12, we have had people that have said we're only going to do a virtual makeup day for 9 through 12 because, again, we don't want to mess with that graduation date. You know, we're having it at, you know, Lucas Oil, and we can't get it any other day than the day we've scheduled, so we cannot have learning go beyond that. So then you just have to work that out. So that way, if students that are, you know, K-8, they actually missed the day, the other ones did virtually, you know, that, again, up to your district. How does that look for, you know, all of the people, all of your teachers, for families? It's just really up to you. Some communities, that's not a problem. We can have it differentiated by grade level. For other people, it is a problem. And the other thing, I guess, to this is not an option for everyone. Not everybody is ready to do this. And I certainly hope that everyone understands that this is not an easy thing to do. It is actually very difficult to pull this off and do it well. You have to make sure all your teachers are available, all students are learning. This is not something that anyone should do, just, you know, say, oh, we're going to do e-learning next week. It takes a lot more work than that, a lot more planning, a lot more communication, a lot more professional development for teachers and for students to make sure that they can interact with their learning. So not an easy thing, and it's kind of a hard one to get to. So the last thing you see there is that superintendent's name goes in there. And what that is that's a legal and binding kind of signature saying that we can and we will meet the criteria that we just went through. Does it look the same in every one of our school districts? Absolutely not. Does it even look the same for every specific child? No, and I certainly hope that on any other day of learning that is the case all across our state, that we are always meeting the needs of our students and our communities that best suits and serves them. So we want to honor that for you. We just want to make sure that you can pull this off before you put your name there. So this is kind of what it takes to do a virtual learning day. I think I want to make sure that people, if you have questions, I really want to get to those. So I'm going to take a look here and see if Mary or I have missed questions. Yeah, so here's a good one. Someone asked, and I don't know if you've seen that, you know, what if power is out? How would you handle this? You know, that's a really good question, and I've thought about that too. You know, what if, you know, you plan for it and then a whole section's without power? To be honest, I don't know what you're going to do about that. Probably if an entire part of your population was out, then, you know, that work's going to have to be made up at a different time. I'm not really sure what that looks like. I haven't heard that it's happened. I do know, like I said, one district did send home kind of some alternatives to it, just in case it didn't work out quite well. But, you know, that's kind of one of those unknown factors that I'm not really sure what you do about that. So that's kind of a tricky one, and I'd welcome anybody's thoughts about that. Tracking attendance. You need to show that you did track attendance, that you have some way of knowing if students were there. So whether it's by all their work was turned in, and so therefore, you know, we had them sign in early in the day through a Google Doc or through the learning management system, or we actually looked through the learning management system as time. It depends on what you're using in your district and what really can happen. You know, teachers have them call in, exchange an email at specific times of the day. That's kind of up to your district again. So, so that's just part of it. I think, Mary, we are going to archive this, and certainly the application, really the slides are just the application, which is on the website, and you can get to that website off of our front page at Office of eLearning. You can see the virtual option. It has lots of information there. It even has a link to a presentation that 3 of our districts have done at some of the conferences around the state. So Yorktown, McConaughey, and Zionsville have presented on this and have shared a lot of their resources and the way they're getting it done. So you can get to that off of our website. And then we will be archiving this video. So, you know, sometime next week, look for it and you could get back to it. So I just saw here that, you know, Southwest Allen, they even have students a session collaborating how to improve it. That's great. Now, I'm gonna address something that someone's brought up in here on kids having a week to turn work in. So let me say something to that. In terms of legality, we need to see an equal exchange of time. So if you are, you know, it's 6 hours, whatever has to be met, you have to show that exchange of time. So, for example, I had a district last year who said, we're going to use a Saturday as our makeup day. We missed this Tuesday in February. We're going to use this Saturday in April as our official makeup day. During that time, teachers will be available. Activities will be posted. But because they also realized in April, when the weather is nice on a Saturday, there are a lot of kids engaged in other activities, so they really allowed students to have a longer period of time to do that work, possibly from a Friday through a Sunday. But those hours have to be accounted for in terms of teachers have to be available for students. So there is some, you know, trade-off of that. If you say, oh, you get the entire week, the other thing you can't do is kind of double dipper. So I can't have kids working on their e-learning work during my regular algebra class doing that. That's kind of double dipping, so planning time, you can't do that. So I cannot say, oh yeah, bring your e-learning work in, we'll do it all week long in class. No. It's not homework, it should be learning activities that happen outside of the curriculum that's going on, I mean within the curriculum, but outside of the days that are going on. Let's see. Can e-learning be appointed? Yes, we're leaving the application for e-learning open right now up until May for the virtual option. The reason we're doing that is, you know, depending on where you are in the state, maybe you really haven't had any snow days as of yet, but maybe something still, I hope not, but maybe there's some other days to come. So maybe you didn't really think, you were going to need them, but it turns out that you are going to need to use one on a makeup day. Or maybe you weren't feeling as confident about it in the fall, but now you've done a lot of PD, you've been working with your students and your parents and your teachers, and now you feel pretty good about it and you want to put your application in. So we're leaving the application open until I think the 1st of May we're actually going to close it, because by then I think people would know hopefully what they're using them for. And then the reports for what dates you actually do use one on will be due, like, we'll get them out at the end of May, and they'll be due by the end of June. So trying to think of anything else. If there's any other questions over here. Yeah, students who don't have any help at home. It's a really great question. And you know, I've heard from parents that say, well, you know, I should be on the payroll now because now I'm having to help students at home. And, you know, again, I'm not sure how to address that specifically. This isn't about just homework being set up. This isn't just about a student going home and totally doing this on their own. They should have access to teachers somehow, some way during the day. So if I'm a student that's home and I log into my learning management system and I get into my class and my teacher has posted some work for me to do, maybe it's a video that I watch and questions to answer and there's math problems to do, I need to have a way to interact with someone about that if I have questions. Ideally, I've seen teachers put up videos of themselves teaching it and then offer certain hours during the day when they'll be online to discuss any questions people have. I've also watched a live chat where students have helped each other. And students have said, you know, I'm really struggling with this. How do I, you know, and then a student steps up to help. So again, if you don't have parental help at home, it isn't supposed to be a student on their own completely. They should have some access to teachers during the day anyway. So I'm trying to read your questions while I'm doing this. Yeah, parents, you know, taking kids to daycare. Again, I've heard from some families that communities that said, you know, we worked with our daycares. We know we have specific daycares where lots of our kids go. We've worked with them. The daycares are on board. They've got online access. Other times I've heard people say we just had to wait till the kids got home to do the work. But that's the kind of thing that really you should know before you start this. I would think, and having been a classroom teacher, I would be hopeful that when I know this is a possibility for my students, that I'm going to be, even if the district is sending out, you know, communication about this, I'm going to be communicating with my own families and saying, you know, this is what this is going to look like. Here's how I'm going to be available. And if I have parents that say, gosh, you know, we're not going to be able to do that, or, you know, we didn't have internet, I'm going to have to help work through that with my students and what that might look like on those days or for wherever they're going to be. That's a lot. Again, it's not an easy thing. I really took offense at some members around the state who have said, oh, you know, schools are taking this option because it's just easy. They don't want, you know, teachers just want a day off paid and kids don't, you know, and I'm like, goodness gracious, this is anything but easy. This is a much harder lift when you're first learning to do it than it is to have kids in your classroom. But I think we have to continue to transform what learning is. We have to know that kids can learn certainly inside of our buildings, but absolutely outside of them. There's so many ways to engage with great content and to connect and collaborate with other students, not only just from our classes, but obviously around the world. But if we don't start to bring these in, hopefully in our regular class days, then things like the e-learning days won't be such a struggle or such a lift for everyone. But again, this is an option, not for everybody. Nothing we're pushing on anyone. And hopefully you won't consider it as a district unless you are there. Now, from our point of view, from our office, we want to help you get there, and we do all the time. The Office of eLearning is about helping all schools and all classrooms use technology to truthfully enhance their teaching and learning. What's possible when we have technology in the hands of our teachers and students that wasn't? How can I really transform the learning experience? So that's our job all the time, and we want to give you resources and connect you to great models of that. So we're always doing things to make that happen during the day, and this is just one little program of that. But anything that we can do to support that is what we want to know about. So if there's things that you need from us, we want to know that. So yes, somebody asked about those hours. Yes, we need to have an equal exchange of time. You have to be able to show that, you know, again, you got to think about this. 5 hours worth of learning and instruction and work goes on. Is there a student that's going to get through that quicker? Probably yes. Does that not happen in our classrooms? I know I taught 5th grade. I had a lot of students that would finish the work earlier than some of my other students who didn't get it finished even in the time. That's always going to happen. So we have to show that students were engaged, teachers were there. There has to be a somewhat equal trade out of time, although it may not be exact, just like it isn't on any day in terms of the actual interaction of students with curriculum. So what you couldn't do is just say, hey, we're going to have you know, teachers available for an hour after school a day, and that's going to count for a day that we missed. Can't do it that way. There has to be a more equal time exchange. So, gosh, this has taken a lot longer than I even thought it would, but I probably have talked way too much. I hope that some of this information has been helpful to people. If you have any other questions, feel free to, you know, send them later if you want to. I'll try to point people to this webinar as much as we can. You don't have to keep a report of this. Certainly, I think for your own, just like you do any day, how do you know that teaching and learning is happening in your schools? How do we know that students, they're still going to be held accountable, you know, whether it's on our standardized state test or on your own assessments, they're still held accountable for the learning. So regardless of what that looks like, on a normal day or on an e-learning day, you're still going to have to hold students accountable. We want to know at the state level what days that you use the virtual option and what your attendance looked like on those days. How do you determine that attendance? Like I said, there's many ways of doing that. And so, you know, that just looks different again. And we had any feedback, what teachers do with all the work students turn in a short time. Well, you know, again, you got to think about that when you design the work. So I'm not going to give just worksheets after worksheets. Hopefully I'm going to have some interaction. Maybe students are, maybe I put up a question and kids are posting in real time on a collaborative document. So it's not so much about grading all of this work that kids turn in. Maybe they have to go on and watch a series of videos and pose some questions that then we're all going to discuss the next day. It's a lot like flipping a classroom. Doesn't necessarily just mean, oh, suddenly I've got all this work to grade any more than it would on any other day. So, you know, if I have good friends that are high school teachers. They have 160 kids in a day. They certainly have some days when if every one of those classes are writing papers and they turn them around, you know, are they going to turn them around and grade them overnight? Probably not. Are they not going to assign that kind of work for every single child? Hopefully not. So that's the part where we have to know a little bit more about how do we engage students with technology and digital resources that aren't just PDFs of worksheets or aren't just writing a paper. There are so many other ways to do that, but again, we're not all at that place. And so that's something you're going to have to learn to balance and check. We've got some really great districts have been doing these lessons. We are putting together with a digital cohorts of teachers that are building lessons, and we have those off of our website. So yes, if you have a series of work that has to be done and those students turn that in, can that count for attendance? Yes. Did students get all their work done? Yes. Isn't that what we hope on any day, that students come, they learn, they show, they can evidence that they've learned, and if they have, I call that a good day. So yes, that can happen. Mary, why don't you take me through the rest of these slides so we can get through them real quick, and then that way we just wanted to share that we've got a lot going on in e-learning outside of the virtual option. Some of these things hopefully will support the kind of things that are happening on virtual option days. We just started our book club this week. It's just introduction week, where Mary, actually Carnahan, is in charge of this project. So you can see this book for this spring is Pure Genius, which is by Don Wettrick, who is a teacher in Noblesville. So if you are wanting to join the online book blog group, all you do is find all of this off our website and join up. This is just the introduction week, so you have plenty of time. And then every week, Mary posts a question from a different chapter, and people have discussions around it. So that's a great thing happening. It is also Digital Learning Month in Indiana. Indiana loves digital learning. We have a lot of support things going on that can be helpful to people with e-learning. We have a Web 2.0 challenge every day of February. We have teachers and administrators on blogging about technology tools that can be used in the classroom. And there's already been some great ones for the first 3 days. So you can find all of this off our website, and you can get to those. They're not just, here's the tool. There's little tutorials on how they're being used in class. We have the Hoosier Student Digital Leaders as a new initiative out of our office this year. Michelle Green is leading that work. And we are bringing, we have a lot of tech teams all over our state, whether they are groups of students that are on the techie side, helping to, actually fix and work with technology, but we also have student groups that are looking at things like responsible use and digital citizenship. So the Hoosier Student Digital Leaders Initiative brings those advisors all together virtually so that they can have support and share resources. And really exciting, we're going to be hosting a Hoosier Student Digital Leaders Showcase and Conference for students only on April the 11th. And if you have student teams in your district, make sure that you get on the website and find out about that and plan on attending. We also have an unconference coming up on March 7th at Danville. They're hosting for us, and we're going to be having an unconference for anyone who acts in the role of like an e-learning coach or technology integration specialist. We're bringing those people together on that day to learn together, to define what it is they want to learn about. So those are 4 of the things going on out of our office. And Mary, I think our next slide might show people how to get to us. If you don't know, everything that we have we share off of our page of the Office of eLearning. If you go into the Department of Ed's site, under any of the drop downs for teachers or administrators, you'll find eLearning, and once you click there on our home page, you will see things like I just went over, the Digital Learning Initiative, the virtual option. We have a grant that's out right now that closes this Friday. The digital cohort for teachers are there. And we have a lot of things over to the left side for social media and professional development that you can get to. Summer of eLearning will be coming up this summer, where we're going to have 23 conferences around the state to help with educators and administrators learn more about e-learning and what it looks like to teach and learn in this digital age of education. So that's pretty exciting. And the last slide, Mary, as always, we want to stay in contact with you. So today's webinar is, we have lots of webinars throughout the year that Mary produces. Those are part of our 21st Century Learning Lab. You can find out about those. There's lots of topics, and we're always looking for participants and topics and leaders. You can follow us on Twitter at INELearn. We have Google Plus communities. We have Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram. I hope that you'll interact with us. Reach out to any of our team if you have questions or if we can offer support to you. So I thank all of you for being here today, and I appreciate you tuning in, and good luck and stay warm and safe. Thanks.